to the Entrepreneur Bite Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Peel. This is episode 3. So, if you listened to the last 2 episodes, we discussed my backstory and history as well as about making money online. So, I feel like the next topic that we should talk about is venture capital. Now, if you're not sure what venture capital is, it is when people get either a bank loan or people give them money, like some of these corporations that specialize in this, as well as banks that will lend out a loan for people to get started. A lot of times venture capital has been used for typical companies that have gotten started, such as a retail store, a restaurant, or anything along those lines. But more and more you're hearing about people using venture capital for online startups, which is something I really want to talk about because I feel like a lot of people think that you need venture capital in order to be successful in online and have a career, which while that might be true in some particular cases or types of work that you might want to do, it's not actually required for every single one. And I kind of want to get more into how and why of that. So first you're probably going to think, okay, Sarah, so I want venture capital. I think I need venture capital or I want it. Why are you telling me I shouldn't? There's a couple different reasons behind why I say you probably shouldn't get venture capital. One is really depending on what you're going to try to do. Are you going to start out as a small company or solopreneur? Are you going to sell something that really has no overhead costs, such as let's talk about selling a product that you're going to send out of your home. It's a service, an app, anything along those lines where you might feel like that you or yourself is going to be behind creating and you don't need to hire anyone and it's truly going to be you. Then no, you're probably not going to need it because venture capital is going to be a needless loan which you would have to pay back irregardless of your success or not. And is that something you really want to take a risk into? That's something you probably don't need. There's tons of companies that have started online with $0 put behind them or even being under $100. If you ever read the book The $100 Startup, which is excellent, it's one of my favorites. It really inspired me, which is part of the reason why this podcast came out. It's something that I really suggest reading because it shows you that it's not really needed, and a lot of people think it is. That's why you see sites like Kickstarter, people coming out with those sites all the time, or GoFundMe, when the reality is that you don't really need them. Those loans are nice, sure. They might be able to help you pay your rent while you're starting up, but is that something you really want to risk? Is that needed? No, it's not. Now, granted, if you're going to have a retail space, a warehouse, you're going to pay people to design your products, then yeah, you might want venture capital. But again, is it really needed? Especially if you're going to sell online or you're going to do drop shipping or even do FB, the fulfilled by Amazon, FBA, doing stuff on Amazon. Do you really need that? No, you don't. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have some money to start from, but again, is it necessary? Is it something that you really need? Probably not. If you really want to do it, you don't want to have the debt, you don't want the risk, you could probably save up and do it and just delay the time a little bit more. Or start out on a really small level, like maybe have a test run of 10 different products and see if you can sell it. And that way you can kind of play around with your marketing and your keywords, things along those lines. Now, granted, if you want to buy a franchise or something along those lines, yeah, you're probably going to need venture capital. But the question is, if that's the case, then why are you really listening to this podcast? Because we kind of specialize in online startups and being an entrepreneur online, and those don't need venture capital. Besides talking about venture capital and who needs it versus who doesn't need it, you might be wondering, well, I want that insurance. I want to know that, okay, I will have some money to live off of, or I have money that I need to be able to pay the people, which I might not if I start up. The question is are you actually looking the correct way to start up? I know a lot of people use things like Fiverr.com, which I've even used. It's a great site. You do need to be picky about who you hire on it. I do recommend narrowing down your field and seeing the higher rated people because typically they're going to be better and you're going to get better deal for your money. Or even you could do things like Upwork, which used to be Odesk.com. You could basically have contract that work out is essentially what I'm trying to say. Do you really need to have employees on your market, on your side? No. Half the stuff you probably could do yourself. Would it be time? Would it take a lot of time and a lot of effort? Yes, it would. Could it be stretching yourself too thin? Possibly, depending. But again, we're talking about a small scale of startup. We're not talking about a huge scale startup. I wouldn't recommend starting up with a huge scale anyhow, because again, you don't know how well it's going to do, and it might be something that needs to be tweaked and tried a little bit more. You might fail a couple times, which is okay. I mean, a lot of companies do, and then they get it right. So don't let that scare you off from doing anything. But do you really need venture capital when you might have an issue? I would say no. When I started out with my job, when I used to do freelance writing, that's the reason why I chose it. Was I didn't need venture capital. It was something I could start a free blog. I could use free sites like Associated Content at the time, and things along those lines where I could get my work out there without having to pay. And you know what? It worked perfectly fine. It did what I needed, and I didn't have any costs for it. It was the perfect solution. In case if you wanted to make a website, there's tons of free web hosts. You can even pay for a web host or a domain if you really wanted to. I know a lot of people who get started blogs do that because they want to get started on the right foot, which is great. And yes, I agree. It's an amazing thing to do if needed. But, you don't have to do. There's free options. I know people who say they want to get started in video marketing, such as YouTube. They think, oh, they have to buy a $700 camera, light equipment, microphones. No, they don't. They can just get started very small. Even on in this podcast, I'm not using anything special. I'm using tools that I already have and free services to help me. Does that make it any less of a good podcast? No, I don't think so. It's something to allow me to test and see what needs to be changed and tweaked before I really go all in investing in it. That's something I really suggest. Start out small, see if you can scale it up. But you don't need to go big all of a sudden. There's no need for it. I know a lot of people feel like there is, which is fine, but going big doesn't automatically mean you're going to have bigger profits. In fact, chances are, if you go big now in terms of your size and scale of your company, you're not going to have big profits because that money is going to have to go to overhead costs, irregardless. So if you start out small and use services that can help you keep your overhead costs low, or even free, then what's the point? Why is it needed? Now you might be wondering, okay, Sarah, I get what you're saying. I don't need venture capital, but I still want it. What is needed for it? Granted, I've never actually taken venture capital out, and I don't really ever want to. I don't think it's really a purpose or a need for it, but something I know a lot of people think about. I know when I first did my research, a lot of things suggested you needed to get money for it, and I've seen so many people on working at home forums say they don't have any money for a startup or upkeep for certain things, which is true. It happens. Again, most people who work at home, they don't want to have all this extra stuff. They want to do it on a budget or free, which I get. It's relatable. I understand. But one thing you definitely would need to do is probably get a lawyer to help you write up a business plan and a contract, as well as overread the contract for the loan that you might get. If you do something like Kickstarter, again, I wouldn't say it wouldn't hurt to have a lawyer help you overlook it, because you just don't know what you're getting yourself into or what you're promising. You want to make sure you're not promising too much or too little, because there's going to be people who are going to hold you accountable saying, hey, you had success, we gave you the money for your success, why aren't we seeing more benefits? Why aren't we reaping more benefits of that? And that's something you really need to think about and want to be a little bit concerned and worry about, because you don't want to have to end up having a big lawsuit come down a year or two after you start up if you do start up good, which is another reason why I'm against venture capital, because you just don't know. You don't know what next year could hold for you, and you really want to be careful with that. You want to approach it small and smart and just take what you can and handle it in bite-sized chunks, hence the name, The Entrepreneur Bite, because I want to give this to you guys in bite-sized chunks to really get you guys to think and figure out what you do need, what you do want, versus what you don't need and don't want. So you need to really think about these things. These things I know aren't fun topics, and I know a lot of people, they think it's going to be easy. And you know what? A lot of times, if you read like an example of that book, A $100 Startup, you're going to see there's a lot of people who've even been turned down for loans at first, which, is going to happen. I mean, some people are going to think your business plan is absolute crap. Let's be real. That's, happens. Is it really crap? No, doesn't mean it is. Just because that's some banker's opinion doesn't make it true. There have been plenty of cases where people have been turned down for a loan and have had success irregardless of what the banker said or didn't say. So you don't let that scare you off, but it's all the more reason why you want to be the empowered entrepreneur and not have to worry about loans and debt. Starting a company in debt is probably not the healthiest way to start a company. because again, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if this particular track you're going on is actually going to be successful versus not. So again, why would you want to take that risk and make it harder on yourself, possibly even putting yourself in debt and risking everything you have just for it? Is it worth it? No. You want to take these things as small steps. Now, let's say you started out small, you didn't have that, and you have a chance to grow. You grow really big, but you don't have the money for it. Would that be okay to do venture capital then? Possibly. Again, you'd have to really kind of weigh out your risk versus not. I mean, most companies can grow on the smaller side slower. That's kind of the beauty of being an entrepreneur. It gives you, empowers you as the owner to know what kind of thing you do. Do you want to go big? Do you want to go small? Do you want to take risk and chances? Do you want to grow fast or no? That really comes down to your preference on what you want and what you envision for your own company. So you need to really keep that in mind and decide, no one's telling you the right way versus the not right way. I'm not saying don't go for venture capital if you don't want to. I'm just trying to argue that you don't need it, so you might want to reconsider it because it's not needed. Tons of people do it with no problem at all. Think about it this way. McDonald's got started on the smaller side, didn't they? It started with one store, and look how famous and big they've gotten. They didn't start out with a bunch of stores. So why would you, for whatever you're selling or doing, need a big thing like that? Launching big doesn't make a guarantee it's going to be successful. You're probably more likely to be successful on the smaller side because you have more control over it. The bigger, the more likely you're going to lose control of such a situation because it's going to be too much to do, too much to oversee and look. That is why you want to start small. And again, why venture capital isn't needed. Now, I know. You might think, well, okay, I got a venture capital already, so what should I do with it? Perfectly good question. It's something that you do want to think about. If you still have some of the money you didn't use all, use that money to invest back into your repayment. Make a plan to save how much you need to save to pay it back and pay it back faster. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. He's a great financial advisor in my opinion. He gives a lot of good advice. I would say listen to him and maybe even call him up and ask for advice because it's a good thing. You want to make sure that you pay off any debts or loans the best way that you can with the fastest ability. You don't want things to snowball. In terms of it. So you don't want to skimp out paying yourself, but you also don't want to skimp out paying back people you owe. Same goes if you have employees, maybe you're not making enough money to pay off everything, so you feel like you're going to be late. Be honest. Figure it out. Do you have to lay off someone? Do you have to maybe switch them from an employee to a contractor? That's why you see more and more companies doing independent contractors versus having employees because it's cheaper. Now, granted, I'm not the biggest fan of independent contractors, even though I've done that plenty of times. I've been one myself plenty of times. It's a big risk even for that because you as a contractor inevitably become your own business. So again, it's not something I highly suggest, but that's why I think you should maybe, if you can't do it all yourself, instead of hiring someone or even doing an independent contractor, pay for a service like Fiverr or Upwork. Those services can work just fine. Now, again, you do want to be picky, and you might sometimes invest in some bad eggs with it. That can happen for sure. But again, start small and see where you can take it next, because without that, you just don't know where it's going to go. Now you might be wondering, okay, I have a business plan. I thought I was going to do venture capital, but I'm not. And I don't want to do Kickstarter, but I need some money to get started. What would you advise? Which is a good question. Now, I've never been in this position. But if I ever was in this position where I needed it, this is personally what I would do. And I've done this in the past with other things, not for business, but to help me with other things I wanted to do in life. So I would go ahead and get a part-time job. Save up. Make sure you're putting every free dollar that you have away and save it up and hoping that you can. One thing you might do is get a high-yielding savings account or a money market account or a CD account where you can go ahead and put money in. And yeah, you get a little interest in it. It may not be a lot, but it could help you grow something in the long run. Would it get you all the money you might want or need to get started? Probably not at first, but if you are patient with it, start out smaller, maybe just you doing it, that's one way you could grow your money essentially into a way that you could invest more and maybe start off bigger or relaunch it in a bigger position than you want to be. Again, this isn't obviously a money advice podcast, but it's still good things to keep in mind of common sense when you think about it. You don't need venture capital, and if you do need money, you could ask for loans from people, but again, do you really want that responsibility of owing people money, even especially people you know and are related to? I know I had a cousin that I saw a couple years ago, actually trying to ask people to give her money to get her company started. Now, she was selling something on Etsy. And she, in my opinion, certainly didn't need to do that because she could have just sold what she was selling digitally. She didn't need to do any shipping. So why she was asking for venture capital, in my opinion, made no sense at all because it absolutely had nothing to do with her business. It wasn't going to help her. She could have found a way to do it on a much cheaper dime where she really wouldn't have to pay for anything extra other than her listings and maybe the internet that she sells it on. Most people already are paying for internet, so that's not an extra cost by any means. And selling it digitally, you send it through email for free or have a download option for them. So why is there needing to ask for money? But it comes back to the basics of a lot of people think when you're becoming an entrepreneur or starting a company, you need money. But again, that's just simply not true. I mean, think about it this way. How much of the time are you going to start something that you need money for? I mean, even tons of people who had success on other things that didn't need it. I mean, most people start things off that become their job or business on a hobby, and they start it on a very low budget to next to nothing if it costs anything at all. So why couldn't you do that either? I mean, it makes no sense to do that because that money isn't going to help you in any way when you already have what you need. What really needs to be done is the motivation to get you going instead of asking for money. You don't need the money when you need the motivation to get started. And I think a lot of people get those two mixed up. Or they think, oh, maybe if I have a loan, that will give me the motivation that I need to go ahead and get started. But would it really give you the kick in the butt that you need now that you couldn't do without the loan? I mean, if that's the case, I question, are you truly motivated? Because if you're really motivated, you would find a way to motivate yourself. Because again, you're not going to have that boss really overhead. Even with a loan, you're not going to have really that boss overhead kicking you in the butt. You don't take it seriously on your own, from your own choices and your own decisions. How are you going to take it seriously with a loan tied to it? Other than the fear of maybe being sued or having to owe twice as much as what you already do. It makes zero sense to do it that way. If you don't have the motivation, then either rethink your idea of what you want to do, or B, figure out a way to do it without it because it's not necessarily needed and it certainly have to be needed to do it. There's tons of stuff that can help you online that are free resources. You could even contact your small business association of wherever you live and see if they can help you. Now, sometimes they can give loans. This is true. And again, you better have a darn good business plan if you're going to go and approach that because you still might not get it. But they could still probably give you advice or point you to helpful tips to get started for a very low cost or low budget that's not needed in terms of getting started. You just don't need it. Now, talking about if you do, let's say, have a big loan that you took now, or maybe you think you need it, think about this. Think about how you can budget for cheaper. If you're going to have, let's say, a FBA for Amazon, which is fulfilled by Amazon, if you didn't know what that meant, when you're going to buy stuff, where are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it from a more expensive manufacturer, or can you get it for cheaper? Now, I know a lot of people hate the concept of buying from like China, which I understand. It's probably not the best thing. You do want to invest more or less in American made if you're in America or whatever country. If you live in Canada, you probably want Canadian made. It doesn't really matter. But to get started, would it really hurt to try to get something cheaper if it's going to be the same quality you're going to get in your own country? Or maybe, talk about bargaining. I'm bargaining with people or low and see if you can get the prices lower. Say, okay, I'm starting out. Maybe I want my price a little bit lower. Could you sell me half of that for a lower price? You just don't know unless you ask. And if you don't ask, you're never going to know, and you might not try and think you have to go for a more expensive. It never hurts to ask or try to see if you can get a bargain, even if you're sorry. If you are, let's say, maybe you're in a developing nation and you don't have a lot of internet, find a business to get started. Well, you don't need it, get into writing, get into maybe marketing or app designing. Tons of libraries have free internet access. I know most people don't want to think, oh, I have to go to the library every single day to work. But would it really be all that more difficult for you? Probably not. It probably wouldn't be that much more difficult. It not to mean you have to take more time or schedule your time to work different. You couldn't work late at night, but it would at least allow you to do it in a free way without having to get into debt. We talked about being creative. Part of being an entrepreneur is having to get crafty and creative with what you're going to do. And if you can survive these tests, these startup tests like that, then you're probably going to find a way to survive almost any of the other issues that come up your way. You just have to think and be able to think on your feet and realize, okay, it's just business. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. It's not the end of the world. You can figure it out. You just have to think and think things through and be careful with what you're doing and make wise decisions. Again, not every single decision you're going to make is probably wise. You're probably going to look back and think, okay, I would have done something differently this time, but you learn from every experience that you do. And even if you do fail, you can see what you did wrong without having to owe a lot of money back and figure out how you can tweak it and change it for your next attempt, because most people who do fail end up going again and again until they get it right, and that's the way it should be. But again, that comes down to motivation, not to funding from what you're trying to do. So you need to remember to keep things this way and try to really think, what can I do? What can you do to make more money, a way to fund it, how you can do it without a high overhead budget, and just put your thoughts together, come up with info and ideas, maybe ask for ideas, look online, go to forums, search your competitors, try to see if you can find their startup story and see what you can take from that and apply it to your own to make it better, because almost anyone and everyone will be able to find a way to improve things that already exist, and that includes starting up. Again, venture capital is not needed. It shouldn't want to be needed if you don't have to, and you need to remember to start small. That way you have better control, and that way you can really tweak and fix things that need to be tweaked and fixed before you get bigger. Start small and grow higher and scalable, and then you maybe not have to worry about venture capital, or start a side business that doesn't need it so that way you can save up or get a job. It's not, don't put yourself into debt for your dreams. The whole point of going your dreams is to keep you free. That's why you don't want to work in a corporate industry, or why you want to have your own business. And let's be honest, having venture capital is not really technically having that freedom, because you're tied down to whoever gave you that money. That even applies with things like Kickstarter, because there are going to be people who are going to feel like, okay, this was a letdown. You're probably going to hear complaints. It's almost guaranteed people who feel like they're being quote unquote robbed, in the sense of they gave money and they're not getting a service, they're going to complain. If you ever go on sites like Yelp or Google reviews or Facebook reviews, you always see mostly mad people. You never see the happy people. And that applies in everything, every part of life, including loans. So again, all I suggest is please think about it before you sign up. Do some research, find out what options you have available to you, get crafty, get wise, start thinking, and I'm sure you can come to a conclusion where you won't need to use venture capital if you have the drive and will to push you. And remember, if you feel like that you can only get that drive and motivation for having a loan, then you're probably not in the right industry. And with that being said, please don't forget to check out our website. That is tebpodcast.blogspot.com. You can go ahead and tweet me at MVR00 on Twitter. I look forward to hearing from you guys. And until next time, we will catch you later.